The Middle East is on fire. British military personnel are within range of Iranian missiles right now, and the man responsible for their safety responded to the worst regional crisis in a generation by posting a pre-recorded video to social media. Here is what Keir Starmer actually did on February 28th, what he refused to say, and what that silence is going to cost Britain in the weeks ahead. In the early hours of Saturday, February 28th, 2026, the United States and Israel launched a joint military operation against Iran. The Americans named it Epic Fury. The Israelis called it Operation Roaring Lion. Strikes hit Iranian nuclear facilities, missile production sites, and command infrastructure in and around Tehran. Iran did not wait. Within hours, ballistic missiles and drones were in the air, heading toward American military bases in Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, and the UAE. Explosions were reported in Dubai, the Strait of Hormuz, through which roughly 20% of the world's daily oil supply travels, was functionally shut down. Iranian Revolutionary Guard units warned that any vessel attempting to pass would be treated as a hostile target. Now stop for a second and think about what that actually means for you every morning you fill up your car, every time your eating runs, every time you buy something that was manufactured, packaged and shipped. All of it has a price attached to it that is tied to the flow of oil through a narrow stretch of water in the Persian Gulf. That water was just closed by a country at war. The economists who track this stuff were already warning before February 28 that a Hormuz shutdown could push oil above $100 a barrel within days and send inflation surging again across Britain. You felt the last round of that? You are about to feel this one. And here is the question that matters. When that crisis broke open on a Saturday morning and British military bases were on their highest readiness level, and hundreds of British service personnel in Bahrain and Qatar and Oman were suddenly inside the target zone, and British nationals across the Gulf were being told to stay indoors and wait, what did the British Prime Minister do? He chaired a COBRA meeting. He made phone calls to Macron and Merz and the President of the UAE. He put out a joint statement with the Europeans, and then rather than standing in front of a camera and taking questions, rather than calling Parliament back into emergency session, he released a pre-recorded video on X and went quiet. That was it. That was Britain's response to the most dangerous moment the region had seen in decades. Here is what you need to understand about why that matters. It is not just optics. When a country is in the middle of a live military escalation, when its forces are deployed and its nationals are exposed and its energy supply is being throttled, the way its leader communicates sends a direct signal to every party watching. Tehran watches it, Washington watches it, the Kremlin watches it, Beijing watches it, and the signal Starmer sent on February 28th was this: Britain does not want to be pinned down. Britain will say the minimum required to appear engaged without committing to anything that forces a harder conversation later. That is a choice, and it has consequences. The opposition parties understood this immediately. Nigel Farage was on social media within minutes demanding Starmer drop his resistance to using British bases and back the Americans all the way. Kemi Badenoch backed the strikes without hesitation. Ed Davey went in the opposite direction, calling the operation illegal and demanding Starmer guarantee that British territory would not be used for future unilateral American military action. Emily Thornberry, the chairwoman of Labour's own Foreign Affairs Committee, told journalists there was no legal basis for the strike and warned that Britain should expect its shipping routes, oil facilities and military installations to become targets. Every significant political figure in Westminster drew a line. Starmer released a video. What the video actually said is worth examining carefully, because this is where the deliberate ambiguity becomes visible. Starmer confirmed that British planes were already in the air conducting defensive operations in the region. He announced that protections at British military bases had been raised to their highest level. He said Britain played no role in the strikes themselves. He described the Iranian regime as utterly abhorrent, and he said directly to Tehran that Iran can end this now. Those are not the words of a man hiding from the crisis. Those are the words of a man who has made a very careful calculation about exactly how much to say and exactly what to leave out. Because here is what the statement did not say. It did not say whether Britain was informed in advance about the strikes. It did not say what Britain's position is on the legality of the operation. It did not explain what would happen if Iran directly targeted a British base in Bahrain or Qatar, which military analysts were already assessing as a serious near-term risk given the volume of Iranian missile fire that was already in the air. And it did not answer the question that had been sitting unresolved for weeks before February 28th even arrived. That question was Diego Garcia. Trump had posted publicly that the US might need Diego Garcia and RAF Fairford to strike Iran. The British government said nothing, no confirmation, no denial. The Ministry of Defence declined to comment. When the strikes happened without any British acknowledgement of base access either way, that silence became the answer. Britain had been running this template for months. The pre-recorded video on Saturday was its most visible form. The weeks before the strikes had not been quiet. Britain quietly deployed Typhoon jets to Qatar in January, moved F-35s to Cyprus, and reinforced counter-drone systems at its sovereign base areas. Britain was inserting itself into the physical infrastructure of a potential conflict while saying nothing publicly about what obligations that created. That gap between action and statement is the defining feature of Starmer's foreign policy. Britain moves, Britain deploys, Britain says nothing about what any of it means. And the question you have to sit with is this: is that a strategy or is it an absence of one? Is Starmer deliberately maintaining ambiguity because a country with Britain's exposure, pulled in multiple directions by alliance obligations, limited leverage, forces in the field, genuinely maximises its influence by refusing to be cornered? Or is Downing Street simply hoping that if it says little enough for long enough, the crisis will resolve before Britain is forced to make a choice it has not worked out how to make? The case for deliberate ambiguity is serious and should not be dismissed. Britain has military personnel who could be killed if Iran widens its targeting. It has energy security that depends on a waterway now used as a military bargaining chip. It has a defence relationship with Washington it cannot afford to fracture. It has the E3 framework with Germany and France that only functions as long as Britain is not seen as simply following American instructions. A country that cannot change the military outcome might rationally decide the best it can do is preserve its position as a party every side is still willing to talk to. But the case against it is harder to dismiss than Downing Street appears to appreciate. Keir Starmer built his political identity around a single proposition: that steady, serious, professional leadership was itself a form of strength, and that the chaotic style of the Johnson and Sunak years had made Britain smaller on the world stage. February 28th was the first day that proposition was tested under genuine fire, and what Westminster watched was a Prime Minister who chaired a meeting, made some calls, posted a video and went quiet while missiles were in the air, and his own party's Foreign Affairs Committee chair was publicly questioning the legality of the operation he had declined to comment on. Calm looks different when bombs are falling. Methodical looks different when the Strait of Hormuz is shut. The dispatch box is empty and your own backbenchers are speaking to journalists because they cannot get answers from the government. The question no analyst in Westminster can yet answer with certainty is whether Starmer has a foreign policy doctrine for Britain in a world of open great power military conflict, or a communications architecture designed to defer the moment that question has to be answered in public. A doctrine commits you and gives the country a position to rally around or argue against. A communication strategy buys time until the pressure makes silence impossible. The pressure is coming, Parliament reconvenes and the government faces immediate demands from opposition parties, Labour backbenchers and the select committee system for a full account of what Britain knew before the strikes, what conversations took place about British base access, what operational commitments British forces are currently under in the Gulf, and what Starmer's actual position is on the legality of the operation that just reshaped the Middle East. That accounting cannot be managed through a pre-recorded video. It happens in a room with no script and questions that do not stop until an answer lands. The window for Starmer to get ahead of that moment and define Britain's position on his own terms is narrowing every day the conflict stays live. If you want to understand what Britain's real options are now and what Starmer's next move has to be to survive this politically, watch the next video because it lays out exactly what has to happen and why the choices available to Downing Street are getting harder and fewer, With every hour the Strait of Hormuz stays closed,